Amazing Escape, the incredible story of Isaiah, the slave who disappeared under the oak, revealed. Isaiah stood under the suffocating blaze of the Virginia sun, the air thick with humidity that clung to his skin like the weight of oppression. His hands were calloused from the endless toil in the tobacco fields, yet deep within him raged a fire for knowledge, a thirst that fueled every stolen moment of his existence. Sneaking into the dusty library of the Grand Plantation House, he had found forbidden books, pages saturated with ideas of freedom and dignity, illuminating a world far beyond the chains that bound him. But the stark reality of his life loomed heavy, adding to the already crowded darkness swirling in his mind. Each peanut-sized minute stolen from labor to read felt like a risk that might snuff out the flickering flame of hope. What if he was caught? The thought gnawed at him, tightening his chest, breeding an unease he could not dispel. His fellow slaves remained mired in their own struggles, apathetic or fearful of aspirations beyond the fields. They'd grown accustomed to a life deemed unworthy by society's standards, and Isaiah often found himself in a whirlpool of conflicting emotions. He carried their pain while grasping at dreams, and this duality between the oppressed and the aspiring fueled his desperation. How could he break free? Every plan he considered held echoes of betrayal, mistrust whispering in his ear, gnashing teeth eager to consume his spirit. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Later, as twilight embraced the plantation, Isaiah gathered with his family beneath the mighty oak tree. It towered over them, a monument to their struggles, its gnarled roots rooting them deeper into the earth, while their dreams aimed higher, wanting to break free. Within this serene yet laden space, he shared teachings of resilience. The stories shared between hushed breaths, the aspirations sown into fearful hearts. But as he spoke, a knot tightened in his stomach. The tension was palpable, the heaviness of their reality eclipsing the momentary light of hope. Would they ever know freedom? Then horror struck as Isaiah discovered that the one he trusted most, the ally he believed would share his vision, had unfolded his secret dreams to the master. Staring at the ground, dread washed over him, a chill sinking deep within his bones. How could betrayal cut deeper than this? A new level of anguish settled in the pit of his stomach as wave after wave of despair crashed over him. The world he had dared to envision crumbled into dust, blown away by the winds of treachery. He realized that the road to freedom was riddled with peril, and he risked losing not only his dreams, but the safety of his family. Trembling, Isaiah felt the far-reaching tentacles of darkness reaching for him, threatening to snuff out the small flicker of hope he had managed to hold on to. The oak tree seemed to echo his pain, its branches tugging at his resolve, even as he stared up at the leaves dancing in the dusk. As the sky darkened, he grappled with this harrowing revelation, struggling with the haunting question: how could he rise up now? How could he ignite the spark of hope in the weary hearts around him when the weight of betrayal loomed so large? The echoes of his shattered trust rang louder than any dream, leaving him at an excruciating crossroads, desperately yearning for a way to resurrect his aspirations from the ashes of despair. Would he truly find a way to escape, or was he doomed to remain a prisoner of his choices? The days that followed the betrayal were a swirl of emotions for Isaiah. Determined to regain control over his fate, he began to think more strategically. The familiar sounds of the plantation, once mundane background noise, now served as reminders of his confinement, a constant presence that fueled his resolve, but also reinforced his fears. Isaiah started to observe closely, often going unnoticed as he worked in the fields. He cataloged every glance shared between the overseers, every whispered conversation, drawing invisible threads connecting their intentions. Each configuration of the slave quarters and the daunting plantation house transformed into a mental map, a formulation of exits and entries that could lead to his liberation. His mind raced, piecing together the patterns of behavior that hinted at weakness. The cold detachment behind the master's stern gaze, the occasional drunken stupor of the overseer, the fleeting moments when guards relaxed their vigilance. As another day passed, Isaiah decided it was time to take measured risks to reignite hope. He sought out opportunities to gather more knowledge, devising a plan to continue his readings without attracting undue attention. The library, previously a sanctuary, felt increasingly perilous. With every rustle of the pages, dread crept in. The fear of exposure loomed like a predatory shadow, but so did the potential for enlightenment. Each book could cut through the mind-numbing routine of brutality and despair. One evening, he found solace in a neglected corner of the library, beneath the dim flicker of an oil lamp. It was here he stumbled upon a book that seemed to pulsate with energy. The pages, yellowed with time, contained the teachings of revolutionaries and philosophers who had dared to dream beyond their conditions. With each word, Isaiah felt a surge of determination. The writings echoed his thoughts, solidifying his resolve. Knowledge was not merely power, it was a path to liberation. In the secrecy of the night, Isaiah began to commit passages to memory, rehearsing them in his mind with a fervor he hadn't known before. He scribbled down insights and ideas on scraps of old tobacco leaves, creating a hidden repository of wisdom that served as a wellspring of inspiration. In those moments, amidst the uncertainty of his situation, he forged a plan that would ignite a fire in both himself and his family. But as he prepared to share these ideas, a new worry emerged. What if his newfound ambition incited more betrayal? Doubt washed over him, a chilling reminder of his fragile existence. The tightrope he walked seemed narrow, with no safety net beneath. Would the risk of lifting others, kindling their hope with his vision, yield strength or invite cruelty? One night, under the blanket of stars and shadows, Isaiah gathered several trusted souls beside the oak tree, their sanctuary, now a potential crucible of courage. He took a deep breath, wishing desperately to convey not only his vision, but to ignite latent dreams within them. But just as he began to speak, a voice interrupted, a familiar one, an unwelcome presence that chilled him to the bone. It was the master's son, his demeanor a mix of curiosity and malice, lurking on the outskirts of the gathering. Conflicted emotions swirled within Isaiah, and an urgent question surged forward. How could he trust those who surrounded him? How could he inspire unity and bravery when the threat of exposure hung over them like an executioner's blade? As the tension grew, Isaiah realized that the time had come to confront not only external threats, but the very fears that gnawed at his insides. Would he go against everything he had built towards, risking everything for the ones he loved? Or would he consolidate his dreams into silence, fearful of the consequences? The impending confrontation threatened to unravel everything he had worked for, leaving the revelation of his true strength hanging in the balance. What choice would he make under the unrelenting gaze of not just the master's son, but fate itself? Isaiah stood frozen, the fiery words that had ignited in his chest retreating like a tide caught in a distant storm. The master's son, a figure of authority cloaked in amused disdain, cut a stark contrast against the heavy shroud of darkness. The laughter that had been bubbling among his friends evaporated, replaced by a tight knot of anxiety. In that moment, Isaiah felt the weight of not just his own ambitions, but the collective burdens of those who stood beside him. He forced himself to regain composure, an act of will that ignited a flicker of confidence. This was no longer merely about him. It was about safety, unity, and perhaps a spark of potential hope for the future. Glancing quickly at the faces of his companions, he read their fears mirrored in his own. The tension was palpable, each breath thick with uncertainty. Isaiah dared not respond immediately, waiting to gauge the reaction of the master's son while evaluating the strength of his own convictions. "Out here talking in the dark, are we? Plotting a little rebellion?" The smirk on the master's son's face was infuriating, and Isaiah could feel the urge to retort curling like smoke in his mind. But he held steadfast, deepening his resolve. Any sign of weakness could send them to the gallows. Silence enveloped the gathering, so thick it was suffocating. Isaiah's heart raced, thundering against the walls of his chest. The moments passed like hours, stretching out as he weighed his response. He felt the invectives on the tip of his tongue, but he recognized that speaking out now could expose them to a ruthless fate. In a flash, he decided to confront the young man directly. "We speak of dreams," Isaiah said, injecting his voice with strength. "If you find it amusing, then perhaps you should consider the power of those dreams, even when they disturb your comfort." The words tasted sharper than he anticipated, but they resonated with the truth of his convictions. The master's son's demeanor shifted momentarily, confusion mingled with surprise, revealing cracks in his facade of unwavering authority. "And what if I decide to tell my father about your little dreams?" he sneered, but the edge of his tone wavered. Isaiah could feel the piercing gazes of his companions, their hopes teetering at the brink. "Then I guess you would fear the same stories echoing through these fields, tales of chains breaking and souls uniting," he replied. Perhaps it was indeed reckless to indulge in such bravado, but sometimes a single bold act could dismantle structures built on fear. The master's son's expression shifted from disdain to consideration, as if he were weighing the potential repercussion of exposing this moment. What stood before him was not just a fool to taunt, but a man with a flicker of courage that could illuminate a path for others. Though no words were spared, their eyes exchanged warnings and promises, all charged with unspoken understanding. That unbroken gaze seemed enough to fortify the bonds of unity in the face of imminent danger. Isaiah's heart thrummed with the thrill of possibility, yet a dark shadow loomed in the recesses of his mind. Would the master's son launch this moment into further peril, perhaps even instigate a crackdown of severe proportions? As they broke eye contact, the air oddly felt both lighter and heavier, a prelude to an unpredictable tide of action. It was clear that Isaiah had tapped into something deeper than danger. He tasted courage laced with defiance. Yet it remained uncertain how far it would carry him or those who stood with him. What if this confrontation were merely the first of many tests to come? Long into the night, Isaiah lay awake, contemplating his next moves, knowing that they would ripple far beyond this mere encounter. The choice to embolden or retreat echoed endlessly in his mind, overlaying a sense of urgency he could no longer ignore. In a quiet moment, he vowed that the steps for their liberation would never wane, not for fear of betrayal, nor the lurking evils of the plantation. With fresh resolve, Isaiah turned over another page in his mind, seeking the words that could inspire freedom and stir courage within them all. But could he bear this weight alone? What alliances might still be forged or broken in the daylight of tomorrow? The crucible of confrontation had only begun to heat, and in that moment Isaiah felt the burgeoning beginnings of transformation. In the dim light of dawn, he steeled himself for what lay ahead, knowing fully well it was time to make a choice that would either cement his path to liberation or plunge him into depths of despair. As dawn's light filtered through the thick foliage, Isaiah wrestled with the implications of the previous night's confrontation, each thought tangling with the next like roots beneath the surface of a gnarled tree. The weight of ambition pressed against his chest as he imagined possibilities, every scenario sharpening his sense of survival. Would the master's son retaliate, or would he dismiss the threat as mere bravado? Questions clawed at his mind, a relentless tide that refused to recede. With the feeble sun casting streaks of gold upon the ground, he set about his chores, but his mind was far from the routine tasks. Each swing of the hoe felt disconnected, a mechanical movement devoid of passion. He yearned for more than this existence, a life defined by shackles and silence. But in his core he held a burgeoning strength, a restless dream threatening to burst forth. Around him, the rumble of daily life continued unabashed. Fellow workers glanced at him with curiosity, drawn to the quiet fire simmering behind his eyes. They sensed, perhaps, a shift within him. Yet Isaiah was mindful of their apprehensions. The subtle weight of their expectations lingered, demanding he stride carefully. He realized that, to inspire, he needed to first understand the extent of his own capabilities. That evening, under the oak tree, a towering sentinel of the past, he gathered a small circle of companions. The air was thick with the scent of earth and possibility. As they formed a semicircle at its base, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of fireflies, he sensed the gravity of the moment. This would be the first step toward rallying the courage hidden within each of them, a delicate stirring of resolve ignited by shared struggle and whispered dreams. "I know fear walks among us," he began, his voice steady despite the rustling leaves that seemed to echo his sentiments. "But we can shift the ground beneath our feet. Every heart here is a vessel of untold stories, power waiting to be unleashed." Instinctively, he glanced around, gauging their reactions, searching for affirmations in their expressions. There was a flicker of something, a glint of eagerness crossing their faces. One of the elder workers, a weathered woman with lines of experience etched into her brow, spoke softly. "Isaiah, we've walked this path for years, hoping for change, but fearing the change will tighten instead. What if your words lead us to a deeper abyss?" Her question reverberated through the group, 3 beats of silence that created a barrier of doubt. Isaiah inhaled slowly, the weight of their collective uncertainty pressing against his chest. "We risk something every day by staying silent, more than speaking up ever could. I cannot pretend to know where this path leads, but I promise you, together, we can lay the groundwork for something greater. Our lives matter, every single one of us." His words took root, snapping the heavy air, shifting the thoughts of each person present. Isaiah noticed how his own breath steadied, empowered by the realization that he was sparking a deeper conversation, one that mattered. The pulse of courage began to thrum within this ragtag assembly, and he harnessed it like electricity surging through the branches of the ancient oak. As night descended, they shared stories of loss, shared dreams of freedom, and the flickering light of hope grew brighter. Something was unfurling, a connection that transcended fear. Yet, deep within Isaiah, a shadow of doubt lingered, because their growing fire could only shine so brightly against the darkness of their reality. He understood that converting this flickering flame into a blazing movement would require far more than words. Plans began to materialize in his mind, but each step he envisioned would lead to a crucial crossroads where alliances could be formed or broken. Unbeknownst to him, as he cast spells of inspiration around the gathering, the master's son lingered at the edge of the woods, observing, threatening. The seeds of change were being sown, but would they sprout before the inevitable storm arrived? Isaiah stood at the precipice of transformation, unseeing the wind swirling around him, a beacon cracking the darkness. The awakening of courage began, but could he trust it to guide him through this impending turmoil? Tomorrow loomed large, a beacon cracking the darkness. The pulse of courage began to thrum within this ragtag assembly, and he harnessed it like electricity surging through the branches of the ancient oak. As night descended, they shared stories of loss, shared dreams of freedom, and the flickering light of hope grew brighter. Something was unfurling, a connection that transcended fear. Yet, deep within Isaiah, a shadow of doubt lingered, because their growing fire could only shine so brightly against the darkness of their reality. He understood that converting this flickering flame into a blazing movement would require far more than words. Plans began to materialize in his mind, but each step he envisioned would lead to a crucial crossroads where alliances could be formed or broken. Unbeknownst to him, as he cast spells of inspiration around the gathering, the master sun lingered at the edge of the woods, observing, threatening. The seeds of change were being sown, but would they sprout before the inevitable storm arrived? Isaiah stood at the precipice of transformation, unseeing the wind swirling around him, a beacon cracking the darkness. The awakening of courage began, but could he trust it to guide him through this impending turmoil? Tomorrow loomed large, a canvas waiting for the strokes of boldness or retreat. The choices made would define the path ahead, and with newfound strength burning in his veins, Isaiah was ready to face whatever storms came his way. Little did he realize a confrontation awaited that would test the very limits of his resolve and spark a fire no one could extinguish. As the first light of dawn crept into the clearing, Isaiah's mind raced with possibilities. He paced the perimeter of the dense forest, the ground cool beneath his bare feet. Each breath felt charged with anticipation, the air thick with the weight of unspoken plans. The night's discussions nagged at him, intertwining his dreams of courage with the stark reality of their situation. Fear and hope coiled together. He longed to transform one into the other. His mornings had always been dictated by routine, the monotonous rhythm of the hoe striking against the earth serving as a reminder of his subjugated existence. Today, however, the labor felt different. He wielded the tool as if it had become an extension of his own will, realizing that with this simple motion came the opportunity to cultivate something much larger than crops. This was about planting beliefs and faith in himself and in those who dared to dream alongside him. Every interaction was now a test of his newfound resolve. He noticed the glances shared by his fellow workers, hinting at a growing sense of camaraderie, yet a distance remained. Their fears were akin to chains, heavy and cold, binding them to the status quo. Isaiah pondered how to help them break free, to snip at the links that held them in place. He needed to find a way to translate his fervor into a tangible vision they could rally behind. During lunch, he began to share snippets of his plans. Instead of merely talking about escaping the daily grind, he proposed actions that could assert some control over their lives. Imagine if we grew our own garden, he suggested, a revolutionary spark igniting in his eyes. Not just for the master, but for ourselves. We'll nurture it, protect it. It could be our statement, our defiance. Some listened attentively. Others still had walls built up around their doubts. The elder woman's concern echoed in his ears, forcing him to confront his motivations. Could his impulses lead to a more profound revolution, or would they lead to devastating failures? Self-doubt nipped at his heels, but through this uncertainty, a quiet resolve emerged. It wasn't merely about faith in the outcome, it was about belief in himself. After the workday ended, Isaiah found solace beneath the oak tree again, not only as a refuge, but as a sanctuary where the soul of the earth spoke to him. In silence, he let his thoughts flow, weaving them into plans that appeared deceptively simple, but held the potential for transformation. Each thread was a potential action, a choice positioned at the crossroads of fear and empowerment. But he wasn't ignorant of the threat looming over them. The master's son had been watching, and every whispered dream could provoke a storm. Isaiah understood this was a pivotal moment. It wasn't just about speaking out anymore. He had to prepare himself for confrontation. A flash of growing determination surged within him, urging him to become more than a mere dreamer. As the sun sank lower in the sky, drawing shadows across the forest floor, he resolved to confront the master's son directly. The night would not only be one of plotting, but also of reckoning. He would harness the urgency of his strategies and the intensity of his beliefs to meet whatever challenge awaited him. Tomorrow brought the promise of change veiled in uncertainty, but Isaiah was ready to step into that maw of ambiguity. "It is time," he whispered to the trees, to the night, to himself. The challenges would not be solely external. They would test the very core of who he believed himself to be. Without realizing, he was already on a collision course with his greatest fears and the awakening potential held within him. The ground beneath his feet felt more solid than it ever had, as if the earth itself was backing him in this quest for self-assertion. Yet the weight of his choices loomed large, and each decision might very well rewrite the future. Could he hold firm against what was coming, or would he snap under the pressure? The confrontation awaited, an inevitable clash that would define not only his fate, but the destiny of those who dared to follow him. As he stood firm beneath the oak, Isaiah sensed that change was imminent, clenching his fists with singular determination. As the first stars flickered to life in the darkening sky, Isaiah prepared to wrestle with the uncertainty that loomed. His heart was a drumbeat of purpose, and yet beneath that steady rhythm lay an undercurrent of fear threatening to break the surface. Would he truly be able to challenge the master's son, a figure emblematic of tyranny, in a world where authority suffocated resistance? He recalled the elder woman's wary features and the concern etched into their shared history. Each face at the labor camp wore masks of fear, but Isaiah needed to shatter those masks. His vision of change required more than courage. It demanded tactics, patience, and above all, the solidarity of his fellow workers. But how could he convince them that the risk was worth the potential of a freer life? Through the hushed whispers of the forest, Isaiah sought resolve. He envisioned their garden, a bold declaration of autonomy, but that idea was merely the seed. What he truly craved was liberation, a chance to redefine who they were within the confines of a brutal legacy, to break the cycle of submission. He cast his mind back to the elders' teachings. Wisdom gleaned from generations of struggle informed his thoughts. Patience was a virtue. Could he harness this understanding into a strategy that resonated? Perhaps it was time to break down his ambitious ideas into digestible parts, drawing them closer to him inch by inch. The possibility emerged as he imagined staging smaller acts of defiance, leading up to the ultimate confrontation. A secret gathering by the oak, a safe haven where voices could dare to dream of hope. As he toyed with those plans, the urgency of the hour began to crystallize. If he waited too long, the master's son would solidify his control, extinguishing the faint flame of rebellion before it had a chance to ignite. Isaiah recognized he couldn't be a solitary figure in this transformation. He needed allies who would stand firm beside him. The thought of seeking out trusted individuals filled him with both dread and excitement. What if they were uninterested, too shackled by fear to act? The weight of responsibility began to press down on him, a reminder that his actions would not only affect his future, but the lives of others. With resolve knitting tighter within him, he envisioned gathering close to a handful of those who had shown even a glimmer of interest in his initial visions. Carefully chosen, they could be the spark needed to fuel the fire, a select few who represented both courage and skepticism, yet shared a yearning for a brighter future. Their dynamics could shape the very foundation of this aspirational rebellion. As the moon rose high, casting silver light over the forest, Isaiah felt a transformative moment approaching. The dark abyss of uncertainty was wide, yet he was poised on the precipice. He could either back away or leap forward into the unknown. Bring them together, find your champions, he whispered into the night air, as though communing with the very fabric of the universe that surrounded him. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to dream of their faces, each of them sparked with determination, united in purpose. Could they cultivate more than a garden? Could they unearth the power within themselves to reshape their world? With a final glance at the oak tree, the weight of the night hung heavy on his shoulders. Tomorrow's confrontation was not meant to be just with a master son. It would be a battle against the shadows of doubt lurking in the minds of those around him. As he bolstered his thoughts into a ferocious resolve, he understood that this confrontation would reforge both his identity and that of his companions. In the creeping fog of the morning light, one thought blazed through. Tomorrow was not merely about survival. It was about awakening their collective spirit. The air crackled with unspoken potential, ready to burst. Isaiah steeled himself, knowing that the path ahead would lead to revelations, risks, and perhaps moments of resurgence that would awaken forces within him he had yet to understand. The time had come to face our demons, he murmured, readiness twined with anxiety. The dawn promised new revelations, but would he have the strength to seize them? Would they rise together, or would doubt tear them apart? Isaiah's heart raced as he welcomed the dawn, each ray of sunlight piercing through the fog, illuminating the path ahead. His mind struggled to sift through the chaos of his thoughts. It was as if 1,000 voices clamored for attention, each one imbued with the weight of consequence. Today was no ordinary day. This was the day he would gather chosen comrades, not merely to discuss dreams of rebellion, but to set the stage for genuine change. As he moved through the forest, the world around him came alive. Birds chirped, and the distant rustling of leaves seemed to carry a message of resilience. Raspberry bushes bore fruit nearby, reminders that even in encroaching darkness, life persisted. The symbol of labor's sweetness inspired Isaiah. Could he cultivate a similar resilience among his fellow workers? Arriving at the oak, he took a moment to close his eyes. Breathing deeply, he visualized the faces he hoped to see. Ethan, always quick to lend a hand despite his weary disposition. Lila, a sharp mind hidden beneath a veil of compliance. And Jonah, whose colossal stature and unyielding spirit had often held sway over younger workers. They embodied more than individual strength. Together, they could form a united front. Isaiah felt a spark, an air of promise as he began contemplating how to articulate his vision. The words needed to convey urgency, yet resonate with common experiences, challenging them to confront their fears. It wasn't just about striking against their oppressor. It was about claiming their existence, bending the arc of their narrative towards liberation. He glanced at the gathering time, the sun's ascent marking the countdown. Dread twisted in his gut, anxiety crept in alongside the excitement. What if they didn't show? What if they decided to let status quo prevail, rooted in the familiar soil of complacency? The thought gripped him, but he tentatively cast it aside. Today was about planting seeds of courage. With a renewed sense of direction, Isaiah began to construct a tangible outline of his speech. He envisioned the moments of hardship they had endured together, the crushing weight of labor, the biting words of the master son. Confronting vulnerability could forge a bond, shared suffering igniting a spark of connection. The garden was only the beginning. Cultivating courage within their fractured spirits was paramount. Hours later, as shadows stretched toward one another under the oak, Isaiah stood ready. The first figures emerged from the trees, each one casting their gaze toward him. The sight was both exhilarating and terrifying. He invited them to sit in a circle, a physical manifestation of their shared space and purpose. "Thank you," he opened hesitantly, his voice steadying as he looked into their eyes. "I know we all feel the weight of uncertainty, yet we are the authors of our narrative. This darkness doesn't define us, our response to it does." The faces before him shifted, expressions morphing from skepticism to intrigue. They engaged him with hesitant nods, the initial ripples of curiosity capturing their interest. This could be enough. He pressed on, emphasizing their shared dreams, continuously bringing the conversation back to the essence of their collective strength. It was then that Lila stood, her voice shaky yet resolute. "But what if we fail?" The question struck like thunder, resonating in the silence that followed. Doubt was an instinct bred through years of subjugation, a whisper that undermined hope. Isaiah recognized it not merely as a moment of fear, but the embodiment of their struggle. Failure, he realized, was a part of shaping any journey. It could be an educator, a way to refine strategy and fortitude. Failure is not the end, it's a step toward discovery, he countered, passion igniting within him. If we don't try, they've already won. If we fail, we learn, and if we learn, we grow stronger. We can shape our destiny. Together. The circle's energy shifted. He could sense their collective heartbeat quicken. Would each person decide to join him on this uncharted road? Would they confront their own fears and forge identities separate from their definition as the oppressed? Just as Isaiah felt the weight of anticipation lift, a rustle from the forest edge caught their attention. The master's son had come into view, accompanied by menacing figures. The abrupt arrival brought a wave of dread crashing down on Isaiah. This was it, the moment when courage would either ignite or fizzle out under scrutiny. Would they falter, or would this confrontation solidify their resolve? Isaiah braced himself, heart pounding wildly in his chest. "We stand together," he breathed, as much a reminder to himself as to those around him. The truth loomed before them, challenging not just their safety, but the very essence of who they were becoming. Sudden clarity washed over him. The test was here and now. Would they rise to meet the challenge or shrink back into the shadows? The stakes just escalated, and Isaiah prepared not only to face the master's son, but to confront what lay buried within himself. Isaiah felt a cold swell of apprehension wash over him as the master's son stepped forward, shadows pooling at his feet. The sharpness of his stance and the contemptuous smirk that twisted his lips painted a stark contrast to the communal warmth they had briefly shared moments before. It was a physical reminder of the weight they had been forced to bear all their lives, and now it threatened to suffocate the flickering flames of courage they had nurtured together. "Is this your little rebellion, Isaiah?" the master's son called out, his voice dripping with scorn. The surrounding figures echoed his laughter, a twisted symphony that sought to diminish the resolve they had just begun to foster. The fear that settled in the pit of Isaiah's stomach was palpable. It wrapped around his heart and squeezed, each breath feeling like a battle. Yet this moment was not solely about him. He sensed the anxiety of his comrades. Their eyes widened, flickers of fear surfacing. Would they fold beneath this threat, or would they draw from the conviction lying just below the surface? Isaiah realized it was time to transcend his own fear. He needed to summon every ounce of strength he had cultivated, not just for himself, but for those who had dared to follow him. Taking a step forward, Isaiah locked eyes with the master's son. "This isn't just about me. We're not merely workers or subjects. We are human beings with rightful aspirations." His voice steadied, gaining force as he spoke. "This may be your estate, but you do not own us. We won't lose our humanity to your cruelty." The snickers fell away. He could see a reflection of his own determination mirrored in the faces of his comrades. A warmth radiated through him, fusing his courage with theirs. Yet, as he stood again, the tides of resentment, a small voice in him quaked at the thought of their potential retaliation. The risk of failure loomed dangerously close, a specter threatening to undermine their fragile alliance. "Just walk away," the master's son commanded, his tone laced with menace. "This will all end badly for you." The warning echoed ominously, stirring a sense of urgency within Isaiah. It dawned upon him that this confrontation was more than a physical challenge. It was a crucible, a defining moment that could forge a new identity for them all. The realization felt profoundly exhilarating, as if a door had swung wide open before him, beckoning him to step through. "Maybe you're right," he replied slowly, allowing the words to hang in the air, measuring their weight. "But maybe true power comes from knowing we can choose differently, from understanding our worth is not granted by you, but claimed by us." He could see the doubt reflected in the master's son's eyes, a flicker of uncertainty breaking through the bravado. Could they really claim their destiny? The question loomed, amplifying the tension surrounding them. Ethan shifted forward, emboldened by Isaiah's words. "We won't let fear bind us, not anymore. Together we can push back." His resolve surged, igniting the spark within others, compelling them to nod, to step closer, shedding the paralysis of doubt. The air was electric now, the atmosphere charged with the weight of unspoken possibilities. Isaiah breathed deeply, empowered by the shift in momentum. The master's son, suddenly stripped of his intimidating aura, now stood before a collective force eager to assert its existence. In that moment, Isaiah grasped his true potential, not just to voice his thoughts, but to inspire those around him. He could rally them, offering them not just a way to fight back, but a means to redefine their very notion of self. Just as a surge of determination began to crystallize in the group, Lila shouted, "What do we do now?" The question hung precariously in the air. It was a chance for Isaiah to harness their collective will, to articulate a plan that would not only fend off this immediate confrontation, but would lay the groundwork for what came next. Isaiah's heart beat in rhythm with the resolve swelling around him. Now we stand firm. We confront everything they have tried to take from us, and we turn it into power. The significance of this moment surged through him like wildfire. But as the master's son clenched his fists and his companions shifted restlessly, Isaiah knew they weren't safe yet. This was only the beginning of a battle far greater than a single confrontation. As the looming tension thickened, Isaiah felt a familiar sensation bordering on dread clawing at him. What happens if they attack? What had begun as a moment of strength was now fraught with uncertainty. Would they fight or scatter? The very essence of their evolution lay before him, a double-edged sword cutting through fear and hope alike. The time had come to face not just their oppressors, but the greatest barriers within themselves. What would it take to turn this confrontation into a defining moment of true liberation? Isaiah's resolve pulsed through the air, thick with the ambition of his comrades who stood beside him, now emboldened and restless. Each heartbeat felt like a drum, echoing the rhythm of their collective determination. However, stark reality loomed over them. The master's son remained poised, the animosity radiating from him like a drawn bowstring, threatening immediate tension. With a sudden movement, one of the master's companions lunged forward, as if to validate the master's threat. Fear twisted within Isaiah again, but he refused to yield. The life he had lived, the years of oppression, all surged within him, propelling him to take action. He stepped further into the fray, not just physically, but mentally seizing the reins of the moment. "Stand ready," he shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos like a lighthouse beam through fog. "Today is our chance to define the narrative. We can either cower in the shadows or finally demand the light that is ours." The words poured out of him in torrents, finding their mark in his comrades' hearts. He could feel the spark igniting, a fire developing in their collective spirit. The master's son flinched slightly at Isaiah's bravado. Doubt momentarily cast its shadow over his confidence, revealing cracks where the arrogance had thickened. Yet this fleeting vulnerability ignited a deeper fear within Isaiah. What if this confrontation escalated? What if their newfound courage became a fatal miscalculation? Isaiah's thoughts raced like rapid fire. He had taken a stand, rallying those around him for a greater cause. But now he needed more than resolve. He needed strategy, a plan rooted deeply in understanding the opponent and the environment. A mere glance at the master's entourage revealed the comfort of their numbers, but selective focus on their most dangerous asset, the master's son. The fear he had cultivated for so long turned into a tool, an anchor tethering him to the considerations of strength and unity rather than isolation. "Listen," Isaiah continued, lowering his voice to a fierce whisper, wielding an authority that dispelled the doubt. "We aren't powerless. We've always relied on them knowing our fears. They do not know our potential. This can't just be about how fierce we are, but how smart we become." His comrades looked to him, eyes wide, reflecting the dawning realization of tactical awareness. Their true power lay in collaboration, in exploiting the vulnerabilities of their foes. "What if we maneuver around them? We can use the trees as cover," Leela interjected, her voice trembling with both fear and intellect. "If we keep our movements unpredictable, we can blindside them." Isaiah felt a surge of pride. Leela had always shown intuition and strength, but this moment marked a key evolution in her character. She was no longer merely a follower. She was stepping into her own power alongside him. "Yes, Leela," he exclaimed, the fire in his chest warming with the prospect of strategic capability. "We use the environment to our advantage as much as their hubris. We become shadows within the light they think they harness." The master's son watched closely, his confidence waning as he sensed the shift in Isaiah and his group. At that moment, the true battle was no longer against their physicality, but against the perception of control. The embrace of fear was losing its grip. But just as Isaiah's plan began to solidify, a loud shout erupted from the crowd. Isaiah froze, adrenaline coursing through him while his mind raced. The call belonged to a friend, another worker who had been captured, echoing their plight in agony. The moment hung in the balance, straddling the lines of desperation and encouraging rebellion. The whispers of fear still shadowed Isaiah's thoughts. "What if we fail?" The question crept in, relentless. But as he looked around at those who dared to embrace this moment of potential, he recognized something different within himself. The shift between doubt and the urgent necessity to act. The stakes were higher than ever. Would they hold their resolve and move forward as a unit, or would the fear of their reality shatter their hard-won courage? Every moment they hesitated, vulnerability grew, nipping at the edges of their bravery. Isaiah braced himself, determination hardening into steel at his core. Now we face not just our oppressors, but also ourselves, the barriers we've accepted for far too long. This is our time. As the atmosphere pulsated with purpose, Isaiah raised his hand, ready to signal the strategy. Would they embrace the tightrope of fear and hope to discover their true potential, or allow it to slip through their fingers? The call to action was imminent, and with conflicting emotions writhing within him, Isaiah felt the gravity of their upcoming choices. In that moment, he understood that liberation was not merely an act, but a profound collective decision. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the horizon, unannounced, with undeniable authority. Conflict thickened the air again. What awaited them, and could they stand united against what was about to unfold? The challenge now beckoned closer than ever. The master's son stood with a menacing presence, surrounded by his cohort of overseers. The hardened expressions etched on their faces reflected the dangerous power they wielded, but underneath that veneer of control lay an undeniable tremor of uncertainty. Isaiah exhaled deeply, grounding himself as the atmosphere thickened. There was no turning back now. His comrades stood resolute beside him, demonstrating that they were ready to challenge the long-standing narrative of oppression. A fragile alliance was forming, their lingering fears gradually transforming into a fierce determination. "Today, we take our power back," he declared, feeling the surge of collective will behind him. We confront not only the threat they pose to our freedom, but the shackles we have accepted for too long. The fireflies danced around them, as if echoing his fervor. The master's son leaned back, a strange mix of disbelief and contempt drawing his lips into a smirk. Bold words for a group of laborers. You think you can change your fate? Look around, you're outnumbered. But as he spoke, the energy shifted. Isaiah's heart raced, the challenge propelling him forward. We may be outnumbered, but our strength lies in our unity. We stand together, not as individuals, but as one people determined to reclaim our lives. At that moment, Ethan and Lila stepped forward, flanking him as symbols of their newfound solidarity. The forest felt electric. The oak tree stood tall behind them, its roots a testament to resilience, anchoring their resolve. The voice of the master's son echoed mockingly. "What will you do? Challenge me alone? Face it, you have no chance." His bravado seemed to waver before the growing conviction in Isaiah's eyes. "Maybe you're right," Isaiah admitted, lowering his voice, gaining gravity. "I don't lead us to claim victory today, but to ignite the spirit of rebellion that has been waiting too long to awaken. Each of us contains the legacy of resilience. Together, we are stronger than your threats." His words struck a chord, reverberating through the air like the toll of liberation's bell. There was something in the master's son's eyes, a flicker of hesitation, perhaps even realization that he wasn't facing a defeated labor force, but a wave of individuals channeling years of oppression into a single unified voice. As Isaiah continued to speak, he could almost see the faith blossoming in his comrades. Jonah raised his hand, ready to speak for the first time. "We can reclaim what is rightfully ours, one act at a time, starting now. Let's show them we won't be intimidated." The urgency surged through the group like wildfire. Isaiah sensed the collective heartbeat, thrumming energy juiced by the potential of bold action. They had gathered courage through their shared institution of oppression, and now it was time to transform that struggle into radical change. But as they stepped forward, fists clenched, Isaiah noticed a sudden shift in the demeanor of the master's son. Was that fear seeping in? The smirk faded, his cohorts exchanged anxious glances. "You're foolish to think you can win this fight. You have nothing but your delusions of hope," the master's son retorted, but the sharpness of his words lacked the conviction displayed before. Isaiah seized on the moment. "Delusion? No, it is hope. Hope born from countless generations of struggle. Each one of us carries weight that you cannot possibly understand. But we are more than just memories of what others have suffered. We are flesh and blood, and we deserve to live as free individuals." The tense air around them seemed to vibrate with the words exchanged, sentiments shared, and fears laid bare. Isaiah could almost hear the collective whispering within his comrades, recognizing their own strength mirrored in his declarations. "Then let's show our strength," Lila cried. "Together we represent something impossible, an uprising against silence. We don't have to accept what has been handed down to us." Isaiah nodded. This wasn't just his battle. They were rewriting the narrative as a collective force. "Let's make a stand. We will not back down. Let's reclaim our narrative and refuse to be silenced." In that charged moment, each person felt the weight of history slide off their shoulders, as if shedding the remnants of a long-accepted identity. They shed the fear of being mere laborers and dressed themselves as agents of change. The master's son, who had once seemed impervious, cast a glance over his shoulder at the enforcers who had stood with him, their expressions now uncertain. His facade was cracking. Isaiah seized the opportunity, stepping closer as voices joined in a growing chorus of unity. Today, we say no more. Today, we declare that our dreams possess power. With those last words, the ground beneath their feet became fertile, a belonging that each heart could resonate with. The window for true change lay wide open, but it would take the real act of standing together to reach through and grasp it. As tension thundered, the master's son stumbled backward, glancing at his cohorts. They were not mere puppets, but a melange of fear and ambition now realized. "This isn't over," he shouted defiantly, but his voice lacked the strength of an overlord. The feigned authority that once shielded him was rapidly wearing thin. Isaiah seized the opportunity, stepping closer as voices joined in a growing chorus of unity. Today, we say no more. Today, we declare that our dreams possess power. With those last words, the ground beneath their feet became fertile, a belonging that each heart could resonate with. The window for true change lay wide open, but it would take the real act of standing together to reach through and grasp it. As tension thundered, the master's son stumbled backward, glancing at his cohorts. They were not mere puppets, but a melange of fear and ambition now realized. "This isn't over," he shouted defiantly, but his voice lacked the strength of an overlord. The feigned authority that once shielded him was rapidly wearing thin. Isaiah felt the pulse of triumph rush through him as he turned back to his comrades, voices lifted high with an authenticity he had only dreamed of prior. "Stand with me. Stand for all of us. Let's build a future rooted in the strength we find together." And when the sun broke through the trees, illuminating their faces, it held the promise of a new dawn, one defined not by tyranny, but by the collective voices that dared to dream. The moment was theirs, and now they fully understood the power they had wielded together. As they surged forward, resolute and unified, Isaiah felt something shift inside him. He was no longer a single flicker of hope in the dark, but part of a blazing inferno, one capable of embracing its rightful place in pursuit of liberation. They were poised on the edge of a revolution, and together they would write the next chapters of their lives, not shrouded in fear, but gloriously alive. In that historic moment, the dawn of change flickered brightly ahead, ready to be claimed. It was time to rise. Now, for your part, you need to subscribe to the channel immediately to witness the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this uplifting journey. Your support makes all the difference. Be a part of this movement today. Now, you need to comment your reactions and theories about this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this uplifting journey. Your support makes all the difference. Be a part of this movement today.